Hi, my name is Landry from House of Hods. Welcome to my very first webisode. Thanks for joining me. I basically decided to start this online video series on photography because I come across a lot of questions, or I get asked a lot of questions related to photography, and I thought this is a great way to share my thoughts. So in the very first series, which will probably be in multiple parts, I'm going to talk about lenses and how and why to choose them. Now, there's no such thing as a perfect lens. If there was, it would be very expensive and it would not be easy to carry around. It would be very heavy. So you definitely have to choose what you want to do and then get the appropriate lens for that. One of the very first things that you should decide to use is what focal length. If it's going to be far away, if you have the option of physically walking there, then maybe you don't need a lens which can get that far away. Now there's two types of lenses. There are zoom lenses and prime lenses. A zoom lens, basically like this is a Canon 70-200. It's going to let you change and from a wider view to a much more narrow view, which you can see things a little bit farther away. Then there are lenses which are called prime lenses. They don't have any zoom whatsoever. This is a Canon 135. As you see, this lens is much shorter and physically smaller than this lens. Some people, let's say you don't want to bother carrying tripod or monopod, then maybe you'd want to invest in some technology in a lens called image stabilization. It basically counters the motion, little small vibrations that you might have. If you're moving up, it might move something in the lens down, and basically it'll keep the image solid. So it'll be clearer than if you did not have such technology. But this technology, it only works in countering your motion. If you're taking a picture of your pets or kids or something like a fast-moving car, it's not going to do anything for them. In that case, or in another case where you are in very low light, like you don't like to use flashes, you want to use the light bulbs, the street lamps. In those two cases, you want to use basically a lens which opens up much greater and lets more light in, so you're able to get faster shutter speeds, which basically is going to stop the subject from moving, so you'll get less blurry pictures. I have two other examples of that, this is the compromise thing again. These two lenses, they're both Canon 70-200s, but the difference is that this one is f4.0 aperture and this one is a 2.8 aperture. As you see, the 2.8 is once again physically larger, and in all dimensions it's longer, it's thicker, and it's also much more heavier. But coming back to the prime lens which we saw before, and speaking of aperture, in terms of compromise, this lens is not only smaller, this 135mm, but it's also faster. This is f2.0, which is one stop faster than this lens, which is f2.8. Something like this is the Nikon Kit Lens. It's the 55-200 VR. The whole thing's made out of plastic. It's very convenient and light. It's great. Image quality, I really love this lens. But it's not really sturdily made. The place where you mount it on the camera is plastic. If you were to knock on this too hard, it might break. See, this is the 80-200 AFS. This lens is much more solid. It's a metal mount over here. The whole thing is made out of metal. It's much heavier. It's much bigger, but it's much bigger because it's also faster. When we mentioned the aperture, it's 2.8. Talking about the build quality again, if you look at the knobs and dials, they're just not made as well. Like this is basically not very smooth when you turn the dial. This is the zoom ring and this is the focus ring. It's just really cheap feeling. And on the other hand, this is much more smoother when you go in and out. If you want to go really slow, you can. If you want to really go fast, you can, and there's an equal sort of resistance. It's just much better to use. One last thing about build quality that's pretty important to some people is that some lenses are weather sealed. And what that means is that the lens in the very corners and underneath all the buttons and all its dials and knobs and everything, there's rubber to protect it from moisture and dust. So for those people working in very harsh conditions where it's raining a lot or it's snowing, the lens is definitely much better built to withstand those kind of places. One thing to note, if you are going to try to use some of these lenses, is that you should try to put a filter on them, because that sort of seals the whole unit, because as they come from the store, the front of the lens is still exposed to the elements, so that extra layer is definitely important. This kind of feature is not available on all lenses, so you have to really look at the manufacturer's websites to see which particular lenses have the feature or not. If you wanted to take very quick shots, you basically are better off with a lens which focuses faster. Some types of motors, which basically turns the lens, are faster than others. They're called ultrasonic motors. Every company has them. They have a slightly different name. In the case of Nikon, they're called silent wave motors. The designation that you might see in a lens is called AFS. On Canon lenses, it's USM. You also have to consider that some lenses don't have very far to move. For example, this 55 to 200 VR. If you take a look at this ring, it only turns that amount from the closest you can focus to infinity. Whereas some lenses, going back to the 80 to 200, it needs a bit more. And in the case of macro lenses, you have to spin maybe multiple times, because when people shoot macro, they usually like to focus very precisely. Using ultrasonic motors, you can also manually focus while leaving the camera on autofocus. So if you're focusing on something and they slightly move, you can manually adjust. Something like that is very convenient. In certain cameras which are connected by the classic old school type of motors, or like a gearbox connected in, you can't really do that. If you tried, you might break something in the camera or the lens, so I don't recommend you do that. Okay, well, that's it for this part of the series. In the next part of the series, I'm going to talk about more of the aesthetic reasons why you'd want to choose a lens versus another lens. Okay, see you. Bye.